The moment you announce your plans, you weaken them. The moment you seek validation, you surrender your focus. If you truly want to change your life, stop explaining yourself. Focus, build in silence, and let your results speak. In a world addicted to noise, oversharing, and constant validation, real growth happens quietly. This message is about discipline, self-respect, and inner strength. When you focus on yourself and stay silent, you reclaim your energy, sharpen your direction, and become untouchable by distraction or doubt. Every explanation drains energy, whether you realize it or not. Each time you feel compelled to justify your choices, announce your plans, or defend your direction, you spend psychological currency. That currency is finite. Attention, emotional regulation, and willpower are not endless resources. When they are depleted through unnecessary conversation, they are no longer available for disciplined action. Silence, in this sense, is not passivity. It is protection. In a world that rewards visibility, noise, and constant self-disclosure, silence is often misunderstood. It is mistaken for insecurity, avoidance, or lack of confidence. But true silence, the deliberate choice not to explain, not to announce, not to argue, is an act of strength. It is containment. It is the ability to hold your intentions internally without needing external reinforcement. That ability signals psychological maturity. Every time you explain yourself, you invite interpretation. Interpretation invites judgment. Judgment invites doubt. Even when others are supportive, their reactions subtly reshape your internal dialogue. You begin to see your goals through their expectations. This is dangerous. The more voices involved in your internal process, the harder it becomes to hear your own. Silence reduces interference. Unnecessary conversation fragments focus. Each discussion pulls your attention outward, away from the slow, demanding work of self-improvement. Focus requires sustained attention over time. It cannot survive constant interruption. Silence creates the conditions for depth. Depth is where real change happens. Silence is not the absence of communication. It is selective communication. It means you choose carefully when and with whom you share your inner world. Not everyone deserves access to your intentions. Not everyone can carry the weight of your goals responsibly. Sharing prematurely exposes fragile ideas to external pressure before they are strong enough to stand on their own. Psychological energy is conserved when you stop narrating your life. Narration turns action into performance. Performance shifts motivation from internal standards to external approval. When approval becomes as the weakens, silence keeps the reward internal. Progress itself becomes the motivation. There is also a moral dimension to silence. When you speak less, you listen more. Listening reveals reality as it is rather than as you wish it to be. This accuracy improves judgment. Good judgment reduces wasted effort. Wasted effort is one of the greatest drains on energy. Silence also reduces the urge to compare. Comparison thrives in conversation. When you are constantly exposed to others' opinions, achievements, and trajectories, your sense of direction becomes unstable. Silence limits exposure. It creates a psychological boundary that protects your trajectory from distortion. Contained energy accumulates. When you are not constantly explaining or defending yourself, that energy builds pressure internally. Pressure, when directed properly, produces momentum. Momentum turns effort into habit. Habit turns discipline into identity. This process is slow and quiet, which is why it is often invisible to others. Silence strengthens resolve. When you keep your intentions private, your commitment is tested internally rather than socially. You are no longer motivated by the desire to appear consistent to others, but by the desire to be consistent with yourself. This internal consistency is far more durable. Words can become substitutes for action. Talking about goals creates a temporary sense of progress. The brain releases satisfaction simply from articulation. Silence removes that shortcut. Without verbal release, the only way to relieve internal pressure through action. This makes silence a catalyst for productivity. There is also protection in silence from premature criticism. Early stage growth is fragile. Harsh feedback at the wrong time can derail progress, not because it is accurate, but because it is mistimed. Silence shields developing competence until it is robust enough to withstand scrutiny. Silence also commands respect. When everything about you is known, there is nothing to discover. Silence allows your actions to reveal you gradually. This gradual revelation is more powerful than constant explanation. Energy invested in action compounds. Energy spent on talk dissipates. This difference is subtle in the short term, but dramatic over time. A year of disciplined silence produces visible change. A year of constant explanation produces fatigue. Silence is especially important during transformation. When you are changing, your identity is unstable. External opinions can pull you back toward familiar versions of yourself. Silence gives you space to become without interference. Contained energy also improves emotional regulation. When you stop reacting verbally to every stimulus, you develop restraint. Restraint increases self-control. Self-control increases confidence. Confidence reduces the need to explain yourself. The cycle reinforces itself. Silence is not isolation. It does not mean withdrawal from meaningful relationships. It means boundaries. It means distinguishing between those who contribute to your growth and those who drain it. Boundaries protect energy. When you speak less, your words gain weight. Scarcity increases value. People listen more closely when you do speak because they know you are deliberate. This credibility cannot be manufactured. It emerges from consistent restraint. Silence also sharpens thinking. Thought clarifies in the absence of noise. When you are not constantly preparing to speak, you can observe patterns, reflect deeply, and refine strategy. This strategic clarity reduces wasted effort. Energy protection is ultimately self-respect. It is the recognition that your attention is valuable and should be invested wisely. Silence is one way of honoring that value. When you stop broadcasting intentions, you reduce external pressure to perform. Performance anxiety drains energy. Quiet work restores it. You can fail privately, adjust privately, and grow privately. This privacy accelerates learning. Silence also dismantles the need for validation. Validation dependency is exhausting. It requires constant feedback to sustain motivation. Silence forces motivation to come from within. Internal motivation is steadier and more resilient. Over time, disciplined silence reshapes identity. You become someone who acts rather than announces, who builds rather than boasts. This identity attracts respect organically. You no longer need to demand attention. Competence earns it. When results arrive, they speak clearly. Results do not argue. They do not explain. They simply exist. Silence allows results to take center stage. Energy conserved through silence can be redirected into learning, practice, health, and discipline. These investments yield returns. The returns reinforce confidence. Confidence reduces the urge to explain. The cycle completes itself. In the end, silence is a strategic choice. It is the decision to protect what matters from unnecessary exposure. It is the recognition that not everything needs to be said and not everyone needs to know. When you choose silence deliberately, you stop leaking energy and start accumulating it. Build quietly. Focus deeply. Act consistently. Let silence guard your energy until your results are strong enough to speak for you. Focusing on yourself is not an act of selfishness. It is an act of responsibility. It requires the courage to look inward before pointing outward, to examine your own habits, weaknesses, and contradictions before criticizing the state of the world. This inward focus is uncomfortable because it removes convenient distractions. It strips away the illusion that your dissatisfaction is solely caused by external forces. In doing so, it restores your capacity to act. Order always begins internally. When your inner world is disorganized, when your thoughts are scattered, your routine's inconsistent, and your values unclear, external chaos feels overwhelming. Everything appears urgent, unfair, and uncontrollable. Focus counters this by narrowing attention. It asks you to identify what is within your control and to direct effort there deliberately. Confronting your own flaws is a demanding task. It requires honesty without self-contempt. You must acknowledge where you are undisciplined, inconsistent, or avoidant without using that awareness as an excuse for despair. This balanced self-assessment is rare, but it is foundational. Without it, attempts at change are either superficial or self-defeating. Focus transforms self-knowledge into action. Knowing what is wrong is not enough. Focus translates insight into routine. It establishes priorities and sequences effort. Instead of attempting to change everything at once, focus identifies leverage points, small, manageable actions that produce disproportionate impact. These actions become anchors of order. Habits are the building blocks of internal order. Focus brings habits into alignment with values. When habits contradict values, inner conflict arises. Conflict drains you and fragments attention. Alignment resolves this tension. When what you do daily reflects what you believe matters, mental clarity increases. Routines stabilize behavior. They reduce the cognitive load of decision making by creating predictable structures. Focus allows you to design routines intentionally rather than drifting into them unconsciously. These routines act as scaffolding, supporting effort even when motivation fluctuates. Values provide direction. Without clear values, focus lacks purpose. Values answer the question of why effort matters. When values are articulated and internalized, they guide prioritization. Focus then becomes selective rather than reactive. External chaos loses power when internal order is established because perception changes. You no longer interpret every disruption as a personal threat. Instead, you assess relevance. This assessment filters noise. Many external events remain chaotic, but they no longer dominate attention. Focus is the antidote to confusion because confusion thrives in excess. Excess information, excess options, excess comparison. Focus reduces excess by setting boundaries. Boundaries protect attention. Protected attention enables depth. Scattered effort feels busy but produces little. Focused effort may appear slow, but it accumulates. Each concentrated action builds upon the last. Over time, this accumulation becomes visible progress. Progress reinforces focus, creating a positive feedback loop. Focusing on yourself also cultivates humility. It reveals that you have work to do. This humility tempers judgment. When you recognize your own imperfections, You become less reactive to others. This emotional regulation enhances relationships. Internal order improves emotional stability. When routines are consistent and values clear, emotions fluctuate within manageable bounds. You still experience frustration and disappointment, but they do not dictate behavior. This stability supports resilience. Focus demands restraint. It requires you to say no to distractions that offer immediate gratification but no lasting value. This restraint is a skill developed through practice. Each time you resist distraction, focus strengthens. As focus strengthens, confidence grows. It emerges from evidence of self-regulation. You trust yourself because you have demonstrated reliability to yourself. This trust reduces anxiety. Internal order also enhances creativity. Contrary to popular belief, creativity thrives within constraints. Focus provides those constraints. It channels imagination towards specific problems rather than dissipating it across endless possibilities. Focus is not rigidity. It allows for adaptation. Internal order provides a stable base from which you can respond flexibly to change. Without order, flexibility becomes chaos. When your inner world is aligned, external challenges become manageable tasks rather than existential threats. This shift reduces overwhelm and increases effectiveness. Focusing on yourself does not mean ignoring the world. It means preparing yourself to engage with it competently. Internal order equips you to contribute meaningfully rather than react impulsively. Confusion often masquerades as complexity. Focus distinguishes between complexity and clutter. It addresses complexity methodically and eliminates clutter ruthlessly. As you practice focus, identity evolves. You become someone who can direct attention deliberately. This identity is empowering. Internal order is contagious. Others sense stability and respond accordingly. This influence extends beyond personal benefit. Focus also clarifies goals. When attention is concentrated, goals become precise. Precision increases achievability. Vague goals dissipate energy. Order within reduces the need for control without. When you are internally regulated, you do not need to manipulate external conditions to feel secure. This reduces conflict. Focus strengthens patience. Patience allows long-term projects to mature. Impatience scatters effort. Internal order supports ethical consistency. When values guide behavior, decisions align with principles even under pressure. Focus transforms scattered effort into meaningful progress by sustaining direction over time. Direction outlasts motivation. Ultimately, focus is an act of self-respect. It signals that your attention is valuable. By directing it inward toward alignment, you create order. That order becomes a foundation. From that foundation, you engage the world not as a victim of chaos, but as a composed, capable participant. Through focus, confusion recedes. Through internal order, clarity emerges. And with clarity, meaningful progress becomes not only possible, but inevitable. Talk is cheap because words cost little to produce and almost nothing to abandon. Anyone can declare intentions. Anyone can announce goals. Anyone can describe the person they are going to become. But words do not bind you to reality. Results are the residue of discipline, patience, sacrifice, and time. They cannot be faked for long, and they cannot be argued away. They stand on their own, independent of opinion. That is why results speak louder than words, not symbolically, but structurally. Silence is often misunderstood. People assume that staying silent means being passive, insecure, or afraid. In truth, silence is frequently the byproduct of seriousness. When you are truly engaged in building something meaningful, you have less desire to narrate the process. Narration becomes unnecessary when effort consumes your attention. Silence is not emptiness, it is compression. It contains intention rather than dispersing it. When you talk too much about what you plan to do, you dilute your resolve. The brain mistakes verbal declaration for progress. Dopamine is released when you announce a goal, even if no action follows. That chemical reward reduces the urgency to actually do the work. Silence avoids this trap. It keeps the reward contingent on execution rather than proclamation. Working quietly forces you to confront yourself without an audience. There is no applause to lean on, no validation to borrow, no external energy to compensate for internal weakness. This confrontation is uncomfortable, but it is essential. You find out who you really are when no one is watching. You discover whether your discipline is intrinsic or performative. Results emerge from the former. Transformation is not dramatic while it is happening. It is repetitive, monotonous, and often invisible. It looks like showing up on days when motivation is absent. It looks like doing small things correctly over and over again. It looks like resisting distraction when no one would blame you for giving in. Silence supports process because it removes the pressure to appear impressive before you actually are. Approval is addictive. Once you rely on it, your behavior subtly shifts to maximize rather than progress. You start choosing what looks good over what works. You prioritize visibility over effectiveness. Silence breaks this dependency. When no one is clapping, you are free to focus on competence rather than appearance. Competence generates confidence in a way that affirmation never can. Confidence built on words is fragile because it depends on continued agreement from others. Confidence built on results is stable because it is grounded in evidence. You know what you can do because you have done it. No opinion can erase that. Working quietly also protects you from premature judgment. Early efforts are clumsy. Early drafts are weak. Early attempts are inefficient. Broadcasting them invites criticism before the structure is strong enough to withstand it. Silence gives your work time to mature. It allows progress to compound privately before it is exposed publicly. Daily improvement is not glamorous. It is incremental. 1% better today does not feel impressive, but 1% compounded over months and years becomes transformation. Silence aligns with this long-term perspective. It shifts attention from short-term recognition to long-term accumulation. There is a psychological strength that develops when you rely on your own standards instead of external feedback. You become internally referenced. You evaluate progress based on metrics that matter rather than applause that fades. This internal reference point stabilizes you during setbacks. When results temporarily lag, you do not collapse because your identity is not tied to constant affirmation. Noise creates distortion. Opinions multiply. Comparisons intensify. Expectations inflate. Silence filters this noise. It narrows the signal. You hear your own conscience more clearly when the crowd is quiet. That clarity guides better decisions. Staying silent does not mean hiding forever. It means timing revelation appropriately. Results revealed too early invite distraction. Results revealed at the right moment command respect. Timing is a form of intelligence. When success finally becomes visible, it speaks in a language that requires no translation. Others may ask how it happened, but the outcome itself is the proof. You no longer need to convince anyone. The work has already done that. Silence also cultivates patience. Patience is not passive waiting. It is active endurance. It is the willingness to continue without immediate reward. This endurance strengthens character. Character sustains effort when circumstances fluctuate. Building quietly trains you to separate identity from attention. You learn that your worth is not proportional to visibility. This separation is liberating. It allows you to pursue excellence for its own sake rather than as a means to validation. Improvement requires honesty. Silence creates space for honest self-assessment. Without an audience, you can admit shortcomings without shame. You can adjust strategies without saving face. You can discard what is not working without explanation. There is also a strategic advantage to silence. When others do not know your plans, they cannot interfere. They cannot project their fears onto you. They cannot subtly undermine your confidence. You move freely, unencumbered by expectation. Results also discipline language. When you have achieved something real, you speak differently. Words become precise. Claims become modest. You no longer need exaggeration because substance is present. Silence before success produces clarity after it. The desire to announce progress often comes from insecurity. It is an attempt to borrow confidence before earning it. Silence forces you to earn confidence the hard way through repetition, failure, adjustment, and persistence. Failure feels different in silence. It is private, instructive, and temporary. Public failure often becomes performative, defensive, or identity-threatening. Silence allows failure to fulfill its proper role as a teacher rather than a spectacle. There is dignity in quiet effort. It reflects respect for the process. It acknowledges that meaningful change is not instantaneous. Dignity stabilizes motivation because it aligns effort with values rather than ego. Over time, silent work reshapes self-perception. You stop seeing yourself as someone who intends and start seeing yourself as someone who executes. This shift is profound. Execution changes outcomes. Intentions do not. Letting success make the noise does not mean flaunting it. It means allowing results to be visible without commentary. The contrast between silence and outcome creates impact. It signals confidence without arrogance. People trust results because results imply discipline. Discipline implies reliability. Reliability earns respect. Respect is more durable than admiration. Quiet builders often appear unremarkable until they are suddenly undeniable. This suddenness is an illusion. The work was happening all along, just out of sight. Silence preserves this advantage. The modern world encourages constant broadcasting. Silence becomes an act of resistance. It protects depth in an environment that rewards surface. Depth produces results that surface never can. When you stop talking and start working, time becomes an ally. Each day adds a small deposit. Over time, the account grows. Results accumulate quietly until they reach a threshold where they can no longer be ignored. Silence also sharpens focus. Without the distraction of explaining yourself, energy is conserved. That energy is redirected into refinement. Refinement produces quality. Quality produces results. Confidence rooted in results does not seek dominance. It is calm, measured, and grounded. It does not need to prove itself repeatedly. It simply operates. There is a humility that accompanies real achievement. You recognize the effort required and therefore respect the process. This humility keeps you improving even after success appears. Letting success speak does not mean withdrawing from others. It means engaging from a position of substance. Conversations become grounded. Advice becomes credible. Influence becomes earned. Results change how others treat you, but more importantly, they change how you treat yourself. Self-respect grows when your actions align with your standards. That alignment is rare and powerful. Silence before success also prepares you for criticism after success. When your identity is rooted in work rather than applause, criticism loses its sting. You can evaluate it objectively instead of defensively. Working quietly cultivates resilience. You learn to persist without encouragement. This resilience becomes a competitive advantage in any domain because most people require constant reinforcement. Daily improvement compounds identity as well as skill. You become someone who keeps promises to yourself. This reliability extends into all areas of life. Results are not loud by nature. They are solid. Their weight is felt rather than heard. Silence allows that weight to register. In the end, words fade, results remain. The discipline to stay silent, work consistently, and improve daily builds a foundation that does not require explanation. When the structure stands, it speaks for itself. Build quietly. Improve daily. Let success make the noise, not because you need it to, but because it cannot help but be heard. Focus, discipline, silence. This is how strength is built. Stop explaining. Start becoming.